Hi, I'm Marty Levinson, and welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Hi, Marty. I'm the real Marty Levinson. Keep on cutting.
Hi, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine.
Come on, baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, baby, don't you wanna go?
Hi there, I'm Marty Levinson. Welcome to the Northtown News Magazine with the greatest cameraman around, Sonny Hirsch, and your host, Avi Myers.
Thank you, Marty. Avi Myers, Northtown Neighborhood News Magazine, a presentation of Sonny Hirsch and myself. Dial us up on the web at www.ntnm.org. 250,000 shows watched. The last 7 years you can find on it, and all sorts of interesting segments and people. Our most watched show ever, The Deep Tunnel. And before I forget, Terry O'Brien, who was the star of that show, gives regards to my next guest, who I'm not quite ready to introduce, but I want to make sure I mention that.
Good guy.
Very good guy. And yeah, you guys are really good at conservation too, which people don't even understand what conservation really is. But we'll, that's another subject for another time. Community policing, that we're very big on. And community policing, despite whatever you may hear, is still alive and well in the 24th district. The basic deal is you get to meet the cops who actually drive the streets and patrol the streets that you live. Okay, there's more of us than there are of them. We let them know what's going on. They let us know what they see. We trade information, and we can work together and keep the neighborhood safer. And it actually works very well. I mean, I basically was asked in 1995 if I could take over the beat for a couple of months until they found a replacement, and I'm still waiting. So I'm kind of sold on it. So I do enjoy it. National Night Out is Tuesday, August 6th. Sonny Hirsch, who is the chairman of the District Advisory Committee of the 24th District, runs Beat 2413, which is Devon to Peterson and Kedzie to Ridge. His National Night Out event Tuesday, August 6th will be at 6 to 7:30 at Greenbrier Park. I'm in charge of Beat 2412, which is Devon to Pratt, Kedzie to Ridge. Our event will be at Warren Park, also 6 to 7:30. There'll be lots of free giveaways for the kiddies. There'll be lots of cops there, so you don't have to worry about the parks or the situations and all the rest of it. And a good show of force shows the bad guys in the neighborhood that you guys mean business and you don't want them anywhere around here. Anyway, it is a pleasure to have somebody on the show that I've met once before, and actually I've grown to like a lot. Even though, and I'm not going to mention this on the air, I actually got to hear his name many, many years ago in a whole different context. But we're talking about former state senator, not to mention Colonel, Roger Keats. How you doing?
Wonderful, Avi. Wonderful, wonderful. Glad to be back.
First of all, thank you, and I'm glad you're here. You know, it's funny because one of the guests earlier was talking about moving down to Texas, and that's where you are these days.
Right. We live in the Hill Country, just southwest of Austin. We moved from the North Shore, from Wilmette. And different world. Different world. I mean, Texas actually has an economy. I mean, Texas actually works. People work in Texas. No income tax. A well-run state. Well-run state. Compare the roads in Texas to the roads in Illinois, although Illinois does have winters and salt, which is part of it. But it's just a different world in Texas. It really is.
So you're starting to pick up any of the Texas accent at all? Or?
Well, look at this. I didn't have that in Illinois.
Oh, that's right. You're a colonel even though you're not from Kentucky.
Right. But we've just finally, in 2011, 2010, we just said, I'm sick and tired of the corruption. I'm sick and tired of the taxes, that 67% income tax hike. I'm saying, I don't want to pay the salary of crooks anymore. I mean, they just sent 15 people from the Building and Zoning Department of the City of Chicago to jail. They have 18 inspectors, 15 went to jail, and I called a prosecutor, who's a friend of mine, who was a lady, and I said, again, these are friends, I said, you incompetent twit, you only got 15 of 18. But she then calls back, and she's a friend, she goes, well, you incompetent twit, what you forgot is I had to have informants. They were the 3 informants, so I can't convict them. So 18 out of 18 guys in the Building and Zoning Department were on the take. And I can't take any more of this. I'm out of here. I'm not going to tolerate being treated as little more than an appendage to a pack of crooks.
And by the way, that's pretty much what it is. I know plenty of people that were shaken down by building inspectors.
Oh.
I still remember, speaking of Chicago and honesty, I actually, for a while, a very short while, was the token white guy with Daily Defender. and I was sent to criminal court to do cases. And one of the guys who helped run the press room, working for the sheriff's department, liked me, took me under his wing, and basically explained to me that you can count the number of honest judges, and this is in the mid-'70s, on the hand of three-finger Mordecai Brown.
Well, if you remember, that was one of my major efforts, was trying to clean up the Cook County courts after Gaylord. In fact, in my book, Chicago Confidential, which of course we're talking about, that's one of the main stories.
By the way, great title, Chicago Confidential.
Well, I borrowed it from LA Confidential because it's the same kind of concept of this is a real story about Chicago and about corruption. And people think, well, you've made it up. No, I haven't. I just changed the names to protect the scumbags. I don't have enough of an imagination to make this stuff up. And so what I did, in fact, a favorable reviewer, after looking at Chicago Confidential, said, this is Forrest Gump meets a crooked Chicago machine. and it's the same concept. I have an honest, hardworking, very intelligent Chicago police detective who carries a story. And then underneath him, all the little sub-stories are all true stories. In fact, I was in the middle of a bunch of them. There are a bunch of them where people say, are you sure that happened? Yeah, I'm sure, I was there. And so that's what makes the book so entertaining. It also has tremendous adventure, it's a fun story, a little bit of romance, a lot of violence, but compared to the amount of violence going on in Chicago, it's not violent.
Yeah, by the way, we're talking about taking it from LA Confidential. Maybe we can get William Peterson, Chicago native, who started LA Confidential, to star in the movie version.
Oh, yeah. But what the point of the book, though, the book was, as you know, I spent 40 years fighting the crooks. And I go back, I was elected to the Senate in '76 and all that stuff, and battled them time and again, and just drove me nuts. I won't waste your time with all the stories, but people can read them elsewhere. But even though Tina and I retired and moved to Texas, I said, I am tired of the fact that the crooks in Chicago really get away with it. And they get arrested occasionally, but the truth is, they are destroying one of the great cities of the world. The downtown is still magnificent. Anyone knows that. The lakefront, the restaurants, the theaters. But you get a little too far south or a little too far west, oh, you and I both know what's going on there. And we're not the murder capital of America for nothing.
My old neighborhood is now known as Terror Town. I grew up in South Shore.
Oh yeah, well, I was Hyde Park. I was just a little north of you then, and so I just said someone has to write, because for some reason the media almost never touches this corruption in Chicago, and it was even before President Obama. They just never talk about it. And I'm going to give you a reality check. In the history of civilization, no city has ever lost more people than Detroit. 1.2 million people. When I went to University of Michigan, even though I'm an Illinois kid, I was a jock, and I was a jock at Michigan. Detroit had 1.9 million people and was a tremendous city.
Excuse me.
Now it has 700,000, and it's a national shame. How many people realize Chicago has lost 1 million? Chicago has 1 million less residents in its peak, and no one says anything. You think we ought to ask a question why Chicago's down 1 million residents?
Well, I think there's a lot of good reasons, but people don't feel it's politically correct to talk about it. We actually had our top total in the census was 3.62 million people.
Actually, but it actually peaked 3.66 when Daley was elected, the first Daley, mid-census. 3.62 was the 52 census, and then it was back down to 3 points. But it
was 3.5 in the next census afterwards.
But it was supposedly peaked at 3.66, and was 2.69 million in the last census. We're down 1 million people, and no one seems to notice. And we're an example. I was a Chicagoan. We just couldn't take it in Chicago anymore and moved out. And it isn't just the schools, because as much as people point to the schools, and there are some terrible schools in Chicago, we know that. There's some terrible teachers in Chicago. But people forget there's also some pretty good teachers in Chicago. Nobody ever remembers how tough a job that is in some of those neighborhoods to be a good teacher. So it's always easy to castigate the bad teachers, and I'll do it as much as anyone.
Yeah, you know what? You
there are
brought
a lot of guys
a
out
sore point with me, because I think, when you've got, somebody ought to realize that once in a while, especially considering all the kids that grow up in single families from uneducated parents, some of these kids are just plain, not just uneducated, they're dumb. And it's very hard to make a dumb person a Rhodes Scholar.
I'm going to avoid saying anything other than, yeah, I've heard that before. And I, back when I was on the education committee, I remember talking to a lot of Chicago teachers who would say, look, I got 35 kids in my class. This is not a problem. I got 5 gangbangers, and they're dangerous. If you would let me get rid of the 5 gangbangers, all right, I'm down to 30, 10 of them will just sleep, but that's okay. The other 20, they want to learn it, I could teach them. But as long as you leave the 5 in, you lose 35. If you'll kick the 5 out, I'll save 20 or more. But for politically correct reasons, we won't kick the gangbangers out. And so you have situations where you have teachers who are just terrified every day of kids in their own classroom. And they're not big people like you and me. I mean, we're big guys, but of course we don't carry guns either.
No.
Of course, now that I live in Texas, everybody carries guns in Texas. but that's the whole point of like what Chicago Confidential talks about is when you're down 1 million people, why? And this is a story about why we're down. What's gone wrong? What are the stories? These are police officers being sent to jail, undercover narcs being sent to jail because the judge was mad that they hung up a mob guy. True story. He sent a judge to jail. A judge sent a police officer to jail. Stories about all the corruption in the building and zoning departments. You know, all the way, Michael Madigan, as Speaker of the House, has these member initiatives. Compared to earmarking in Congress, earmarking in Congress is nothing compared to these member initiatives. I mean, this is simply money they give to their friends with virtually no oversight. You think back to the University of Illinois scholarship thing. The president of the University of Illinois was forced to resign because of Michael Madigan. I'm sorry, Bob White, the president of the University of Illinois, was a first-class educator. One time the dean of the University of Michigan University of Michigan Business School, when it was the top-rated business school in America, and he's forced out of the president of the University of Illinois because Michael Madigan's a crook and an influence peddler. Something has gone wrong. It's like an extortion case, and you indict the guy who's been extorted.
By the way, that's the Chicago way. I hate to say it. You know, not to mention the fact that Mike Madigan, among others, but he's probably as bad as, probably even worse than Eddie Burke.
Oh.
He basically takes care of big corporations' real estate tax. And he actually has done everything he can to make sure that senior citizens don't sign their renewals and all the rest of it to raise individual income tax to be able to lower corporate income tax.
You know, and let me go a step farther. The New York Times, not exactly a right-wing rag. The New York Times, about as far left as you can get. A couple years ago, they actually did articles about Mike Madigan and Joe Barrios, about the corruption of the corporate property tax system and just the property tax system in general. And they demonstrated that in one 4-year period, Mike Madigan had shifted $1 billion from his clients to you and me and the little guys. And Madigan was taking home several $1 million a year. Now here you are, a political boss. You have total control of the system. And who are the #1 recipients? Mike Madigan and Ed Burke. Now, Tom Hines was big, John Cullerton was big, all the big Chicago machine guys were there. And that's part of what this book is all about. I mean, in Chicago, we have gotten so immune to this stuff, we just think everything's corrupt. Well, government can be corrupt. Bigger governments are more corrupt. But it's not like this elsewhere. I mean, I live in Texas. I got a brother in Arizona. I mean, we have friends in a lot of places. This corruption is not normal. Other people don't have 18 out of 18 inspectors in the building department go to jail. They haven't had 4 of the last 7 governors go to jail. They haven't had 100-some judges and court personnel go to jail. That is more than the other 49 states added together. People in Chicago have got to wake up. I mean, you are subsidizing and supporting crooks. I mean, you look at an example. Remember Neil Hartigan?
Yeah, very well.
He was on the board of Freddie Mac, as was Rahm Emanuel, when Freddie Mac was violating every single law in accounting law in the country and frankly costing us as taxpayers $150 billion. Now, Rahm and Neil Hartigan were making $350,000 apiece. And what did they do about a company that was clearly corrupt and clearly doing things that were illegal and unethical that cost us $150 billion? Can you tell me what any of them did?
Nothing.
They accepted their paychecks. You know, we think this is normal. Why is someone not complaining? Chicago voters have gotten to be so docile. I mean, in 2006, was there anyone in Chicago who was literate who didn't know that Blagojevich was perhaps ethically challenged?
That is one of the politest ways I could have possibly put it.
Now, in the last election, when Jesse Jackson Jr. disappeared for several months, after everyone knew the feds were investigating him, no one could quite figure out there might have been a reason why he disappeared for a while.
By the way, I am very, and I wish I had the issue in front of me, I am very proud of the fact that basically before he even got indicted and before all this stuff came up, that I basically called him a crook who needs to be indicted and then some, and everything. You know, you don't have to be blind. You have to be blind not to see these things. Well, I mean, he mysteriously gets ill, and he has this bipolar situation all of a sudden, but it was okay for him to be a congressman with it as long as he wasn't in trouble.
And he lives in a nice home in Chicago with his wife on paper and lives in a $2 million mansion in Georgetown. Does anyone think they should maybe ask what's going on? Where's the money? I mean, the guy's never had a job in his life before he's elected to Congress. His wife has really never worked before she was elected an alderman. I'm not attacking them as individuals. I don't really know them as individuals. But they're living in a couple $1 million worth of houses, you know, living a lifestyle that of only the rich and famous, and no one asks any questions. I know it's Chicago. I know we were used to this, but it's pretty obvious. Chicago has 50 aldermen, okay? And Sandy Jackson's already pled guilty, and when she goes to jail, just in the time you and I have kind of been kids in the neighborhood, 38 of the 50 aldermen have gone to jail, including father and son acts. You know, the Crothers on the west side, and John and John DiArco, and John DiArco's dad. I mean, at some point, by the time the dad's in jail, you ought to wonder about the kid. By the time the father and son have gone to jail, at least don't elect the grandkid. I don't understand how Chicago could have enough aldermen in jail that they could hold a city council meeting in the federal pen, and no one worries about it. They reelect them. And in my book, I have a story, Chicago Confidential, where we talk about one of the aldermen who has close ties into the gangs, and exactly like, remember Dorinda Troutman, who's still in prison? I mean, she was a front for the gangs, and she used to get reelected regularly, you know, and be endorsed. Some point you have to say to Chicago voters, when you've got 38 of 50 aldermen, all your city inspectors, 4 governors, and according to the Chicago Tribune, I'm just quoting their numbers, over 1,000 city and county employees have gone to jail. A voter ought to just look in the mirror and go, am I doing something wrong? Should I think about these candidates? I mean, Eddie Verdoliak. I mean, remember Consul Wars?
Yeah.
Were any of those aldermen voted out of office? I mean, so I say to the voters, read Chicago Confidential. It's available any place you want to go online, all that sort of stuff. Because we recount the scandals, but we put it in human terms. We have a very bright Chicago police officer who's he was a Comanche, orphaned as a young man, a Special Forces Afghanistan veteran with a very checkered past, and then his friends who are police officers. And as they investigate crime in Chicago, they keep tripping over crime in Chicago. And time after time, you bump into stories where you're going, that can't have happened. And then you read the epilogue and go, oh God, that's right, I remember when it did. And so we use, as the very nice, very favorable reviewer said, Forrest Gump meets a crooked Chicago machine. And you talk about the corruption in the city, but put an interesting story that's got a likable hero, a little bit of romance, a little bit of violence, a lot of action, but episodes that remind you of, that's right, that did happen, and I remember that. And at some point we have to ask, then we come to the story, the street gangs. Why could the street gangs kill 500 some people last year and really not very many get arrested? Well, they are part of the Chicago Democrat machine. Don't take my word, take the research like Chicago Magazine's guys Isaacson and whatever. There's been a whole series of studies on the ties between the gangs and the machine. You know, if you're a street gang, say you're a gangster disciple, and this is your neighborhood, if you just sell drugs and shoot guys in your neighborhood, it's okay. Now, if you cross into another neighborhood, or you go downtown, now that's not okay. Then you get arrested, then you get sent to jail. But as long as, and I hate to use a racial term, but as long as black guys kill black guys and Latino guys kill Latino guys, it's okay by the machine. Just make sure you don't go in the areas where you don't belong. And that's why these gang guys don't get arrested. Now, right now, Mayor Emanuel is doing exactly what Rudy Giuliani did in New York to try and break the back of the gangs. He flooded police into high crime areas. The only trouble is Rudy Giuliani had 40,000 police officers. Rahm Emanuel has 12,000.
Not anymore. It's down to 9 and change.
Oh, God. I don't even want to hear that. But these are all the stories the book is, but in fun stories. And I even use a little bit of information. Remember Dick Simpson, the alderman from the north side?
Yeah, he used to live around here. I know him very well.
Very much a progressive Democrat. I like Dick Simpson. I have nothing but nice things to say.
Honest man.
Yeah, no question. But he's no right-winger. He's a progressive Democrat.
Oh, no, but he's as left as they come.
And his studies, he's a professor at the University of Illinois now. He's done a series of studies.
He's been there many years, political science, and I know a lot of people who think of him as their guru.
Oh, and he's a legitimate PhD. He's a legitimate professor. And he's done at least, I think, 3 I can think of studies comparing criminal activity. And the city of Chicago we're not just the most corrupt city in the country. We're 1, 2, and 3. There's nothing comparable to Chicago in terms of corruption. And his lays it out. Now, he does it as a college professor, statistical analysis, et cetera. And it's interesting. Maybe interesting for you and me, maybe not interesting for the average guy, but you and I'd sit here and read it.
Yeah.
But I take the book and I put the flesh on what Dick Simpson writes about the corruption in Chicago to try and put it in real terms. I mean, there's a story in here when this judge sends a undercover narc to jail because they busted a mob drug gang. Now, it's a true story. It happened.
One of the things, this just happened in the last year, but a state representative, and he's been on the show as a matter of fact, and did a very good Marty Levinson. Actually, it was kind of funny as Marty Levinson. He was indicted. And basically, all the ward committeemen, around him, he was somewhere near the Chicago Stadium in that area. All the ward committeemen around him basically were telling people, we want you to vote for him. Don't vote for his opponent. His opponent was basically not going to play ball with him. So they elected him in the primary, then they ran their own guy against him. But they couldn't train their own people not to pull the Democratic lever. And despite the fact that he's under federal indictment, okay, and by the way, actually the FBI actually used footage of the Northtown News Magazine for his voice to compare, our show to compare on the phone with the bribe voice, and found it matched. But anyway, the guy got reelected, 2-1, easy.
You just have to say to Chicago voters, you can make a mistake once in a while, but there were 2 state reps in the last election under indictment, and both were reelected.
Right.
But it comes back to, it's a sad thing to say, but you sort of have to name names. And one of our problems is the prosecutors. Now, if you like Lisa Madigan, great. If you don't, I don't care. She's the daughter of the Speaker of the House, most powerful man in Illinois. You know how many public corruption investigations she's done in the most corrupt city in America?
None.
Anita Alvarez, the Crook County State's Attorney. She spent 13 years as Dick Devine's assistant in charge of public corruption. You know how many public corruption investigations she did?
I know, nothing.
0. And then Dick Devine was the state's attorney for 12 years?
Yep.
How many public corruption investigations did Dick Devine do? Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Now, if you know the law enforcement agencies are not going to investigate you, you can be pretty aggressively crooked. That's how you get 38 aldermen going to jail. Now, again, just in our time, 4 out of 7 governors. I served with 15 legislators who went to prison, okay? 100-some judges and court personnel who went to prison. 1,000-some municipal employees who went to prison. This is not normal in America. This is normal in one place, the city of Chicago. Now, I love Chicago. I'm a Chicagoan. You and I are Chicagoans. I'm from Hyde Park. I've lived in the suburbs. Even though I'm a Big Ten jock at Michigan, I still went to Illinois for grad school, U of I. I mean, I'm a son of the heartland. But I'm sorry. I'm not going to live in the most corrupt city in America and pay taxes to subsidize Michael Madigan, who was making millions of dollars a year, shifting income taxes from his clients, or corporate taxes, corporate property taxes from his clients, to you and me and the people watching the show. At some point, you have to ask questions. And I've often joked, if the crooks in Chicago only stole 50 grand a year, who cares? They're stealing millions. A year, every year.
Yeah.
You just read the New York Times articles about Madigan and Ed Burke and Tom Hines and Tom Tully and all these guys. And now John Cullerton, my count, probably only made maybe $750,000 a year. These are the guys running the legislature. These are the guys who are looking at a pension fund deficit they claim is $90 billion. I want to let you know that's an absolute lie. It's a lot closer to $200 billion. The reason they do it, and I spent a long time in the securities industry after I was in the legislature, they take a rate of return, and I won't waste your time and bore you to death, the rate of return so you'd guess how much these funds will make, then you can see how much they're short. Well, they use a rate of return that nobody in the country is getting anywhere, any pension fund in America. If you go with a realistic rate of return, they're probably short $200 billion. Now, the state's total revenues, including everything of the federal government, gas taxes, everything, is maybe $65 billion. So basically, for the next 3 to 4 years, the state of Illinois needs to spend 100% of every penny it raises on pensions. And here's the thing that people forget. They say, well, if they'll just pass a little something, it'll work it out. No, that doesn't work. There is something in the Illinois Constitution that says you may not reduce a government pension. And even if someone's on 2 and 3 government pensions, doesn't matter. You cannot reduce the pension. So whatever it is now is what it is. And if you already know the state's bankrupt, but since a state can't go bankrupt, we're just struggling along by selling bonds, which we are spending for day-to-day operating expenses, which is completely illegal. And we have not had a balanced budget since the last century, which is not just illegal, it's unconstitutional. We can't solve the problem without a constitutional amendment. So Madigan and Cullerton can preen in front of the TV as Speaker of the House and President of the Senate, but if they don't amend the Constitution, nothing happens.
And with the veto-proof majority, they could do it very easily. It should also be pointed out that Illinois' credit rating is below that of many third-world countries.
We are
Not
a
many,
junk
but some
bond.
third-world countries.
We are a junk bond. We are the highest yielding state bonds and the lowest rated of any state. I don't say this with pride. I mean, I was an Illini for 60 plus years of my life. You know, I mean, I served this state in a lot of ways. And I just look at this, and it's all the last 15 years. When Jim Edgar left office, you can like or dislike Jim Edgar. When he left a $1 billion surplus. The pension funds were not in bad shape. The budget was balanced 8 straight years when he was governor. I mean, you can like him or dislike him, but he was a competent governor. Then came the first of the 2 who went to jail, George Ryan, and actually I won't say anything about George Ryan, I'll just merely say I didn't vote for him and I'm a Republican, okay? I voted for the Libertarian candidate because I knew George pretty well. I knew what was coming. I didn't vote for him. And then, of course, came Blagojevich. Now, so really it's only the last 15 years with Ryan, Blagojevich, and Quinn that we've had this disaster. Illinois, for 150 years, was Texas. Illinois was a boom state. We were growing. There were great jobs. We were in an international marketplace. Chicago was a neat city. We had everything going for us. And then really about 15 years ago, we went from incompetent crook to just incompetent. And there's only one thing that's consistent over that whole period. Michael J. Madigan's been the Speaker of the House and the Chairman of the Democrat Party the whole time. 30 years. He is the senior Speaker of the House in America. 30 years. Okay, at what point do you say, you know, Mike, the place is a disaster and you're in charge. Maybe we should get rid of you. But nothing happens. Not one single member of his own caucus, not one single Democrat state representative will challenge him. So when you hear one of your legislators who's a Democrat or Republican, I don't care, saying, well, we stood up for this, we stood up for that. No, you didn't. If Michael Madigan said it didn't happening, it didn't happening. But he also knows his legislators need to pretend like they're doing something. So he'll let them get up and make noise and introduce bills. But if Michael Madigan says no, it's over. And the 2 constituencies that pay for his party are the trial bar and the government unions. You think he's going to offend the people who pay for his party?
By the way, 30 seconds to go.
Oh! Chicago Confidential, you want to learn more about all this stuff and have fun doing it? Chicago Confidential.
And by the way, one other note, when I remember the exact language I used with Jesse Jackson Jr., and I called him a faker, a fraud, a phony, a liar, and I think I called him a thief also. And I wasn't worried one bit about being sued because I was pretty sure I was on sound ground.
Yeah, I was going to say, what did you say that was controversial?
No, absolutely nothing, but most people aren't willing to say it. In any event, this has been great, and I really enjoyed this. And, you know, I could do this for another half hour, but we're out of time. So, Roger Keats, want to wish you all the luck in the world in Texas.
Thank you.
If I could afford it, I'd be there too. And I want to thank my entire technical crew, Sonny Hirsch and Alan Bennett. Thank you for bringing Roger over. Anyway, take care, everybody. Be well. Bye-bye.